All right. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're tuning us in. Welcome once again for another episode of BB Hockey Talk. I'm Aaron Bloxel with my co-host Matthew Balzer. We got a great show again for you today as we continue our 31 teams in 31 days. Before we get into that, a couple of key signings. Well, they weren't really that key, but a couple of minor signings before we get into the Columbus Blue Jackets team preview. But I want to throw in something here quick, Matthew, and I didn't tell you this before we get on air, but Brock Boeser with another 3-goal game last night in the Minnesota Hockey League that he's playing in. I'm impressed. I actually watched most of the game on YouTube, and a lot of people were calling it a beer league hockey, but it's all NHLers just about playing in that league. So you can comment on that, or you can go right into our minor signings, but I know I'm throwing a wrench into our game plan for this show. But welcome aboard.
Oh yeah, it's going good today. But yeah, with Boeser, it's like I saw in the first game they had with the Hattie or whatever. His shot it's so fun to watch him put the puck in the net. Going into today's signings though, just a couple minor ones. Winnipeg re-signed Adam Lowry to a 3-year extension at $2.9 million. Big part of that fourth line in the playoffs. He might be moving up into that third line role with the loss of Paul Stastny. So he still had a decent year, 21 points in 45 games last year. So it'll be interesting to see where he fits in that bottom six. Washington re-signed Madison Bowey to a 2-year deal with a $1 million cap hit. He played 51 games in the NHL last year, but he was mostly the 7th, 8th defenseman. But he should be in that bottom six pairing, probably with Christian Djoos replacing Brooks Orpik on that bottom pair full time. And Abbotsford native Derek Grant signed a 1-year $650K deal with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was a guy that we mentioned with Anaheim Ducks that could potentially sign somewhere with a good deal. And he had 12 goals, 24 points last year. And with Pittsburgh, with that sign, they have a lot of depth at center. Now with Crosby, Malcolm Brassard, Sheahan, Matt Cullen, who they brought in, and now Derek Grant. So you'll most likely see some guys move to the wing with that much depth at center. Excuse me. Getting into the Columbus Blue Jackets forwards now. Good young group coming up here. Their top line of Artemi Panarin, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Cam Atkinson has the potential to be a really good line this year. Panarin, the bread man, we'll see how he does this year with the report about his contract talks that he if he doesn't have a new deal by training camp, that he won't negotiate a new contract until the end of the season, which has potential problems since he'll be an unrestricted free agent. So this will be a big year for him if he wants to get paid. Pierre-Luc Dubois, great rookie season, 20 goals, 48 points. Really fit in with Panarin and Atkinson, who is an underrated. I think Atkinson is an underrated player. It's a smaller player, but he has some really good skill. Their second line I have as Nick Foligno, Alexander Wenberg, and Oliver Bjorkstrand. Bjorkstrand had a really good breakout year, gained 40 points this year. Wenberg sort of regressed this year after getting the new contract. He only had 35 points in 66 games. They'll need him to step up again to help balance with Dubois as that top six forward. And Foligno is another guy after getting a big contract. I think he only had 33 points last year, so they'll need him to step up again. The third line, I was Boone Jenner, Riley Nash, who they signed out of Boston, and Josh Anderson. Jenner and Anderson can put the puck in the net, and they're big. They can be a pain in the butt to other teams' top lines. So it'll be interesting to see how they do, especially with Jenner being a former 30-goal guy, if he can step up and help put the puck in the net more. And the fourth line, I have Sonny Milano, Brandon Dubinsky, and Anthony Duclair, who Columbus will be taking a chance on from Chicago. Milano is a guy that could move up the lineup as the season goes along. He had 14 goals in 55 games. Dubinsky's basically his career has fallen off. Being with Tortorella again, I'm not sure if that affects anything, but it'll be interesting. Same with Duclair. It'll be interesting if he can get into a top 6 role as well.
Absolutely, and very young team, both up front and on defense. There was a few depth players that I saw in Hennekainen, Sedlak, and of course Zach Delpy are going to be pushing for spots there if guys like Duclair and Dubinsky don't continue to grow. But one of my favorite players is Josh Anderson. I think he's underrated player that's slowly turning into a power forward. And this Columbus Blue Jacket team, I think, is on the definite up and up, because I'm also a big Pierre-Luc Dubois fan. I believe he's going to be a great number 1 center there for years to come. So let's touch on the defense a little bit. They are the youngest defense core on paper in the league right now. I'm just going to go over the 6, no particular order, but Zach Werenski, Seth Jones, Marcus Niedervera, David Savard, Ryan Murray, and Scott Harrington. And, of course, they also have a couple of depth guys. One's a prospect, which we'll touch on in a bit. Actually, 2 of them are prospects. They got 2 really good prospects that are going to push for a spot there this year. And, of course, ex-Canuck Adam Clendening. So I'm a huge Seth Jones fan. I think he's top 5 defenseman right now in the NHL. Plus, Zach Werenski had a great breakout season. And they just re-signed Ryan Murray. So they've got a solid core there that's going to continue to improve, continue to get better, and some young guys that are really pushing for some jobs there.
With Seth Jones, I think we talked about before the show. I think he should have been a finalist for the Norris Trophy last year over PK Subban. And he had 57 points, 16 goals last year, and especially down the stretch, the guy was just a beast, doing it both ends of the rink. And he could potentially be a 60, 70 point defenseman this year. And Zach Werenski took a little bit of a step back in the points department from his rookie season, but he's another guy that he had 16 goals again. So he was putting the puck in the net. So a lot of offense from their defense, which really helps. And Marcus Niedervera actually had a good breakout season last year as the year went along.
Zach Werenski, a big meme. He was on a lot of memes this year when he took the puck to the face and came back. But why don't you take us through their goaltending, and then we'll jump into their prospects from the Cleveland Monsters.
All right. Well, I won't pull a J on right just because I don't want to blow anybody's ears, but Sergei Bobrovsky is one of the best goalies in the NHL. Is their big number 1 goalie. He's probably a top 5 goalie in the NHL. He's one of my favorite guys to watch. He can do it in the regular season. His problem has been in the playoffs, getting consistency there. But 921 save percentage last year, 37 wins in 65 games. He's one of the most consistent goalies in the NHL. Their backup goalie, Jonas Korpisalo, is one of the younger goalie prospects in the league. He was sort of up and down between Columbus and the AHL just because Bobrovsky plays so many games that they wanted him to still get game action as the year went along. But he could be pushing for starts as the year goes along. And their third stringer is Jean-Francois Berube, who they got in trade for Jordan Schrader. Berube used to be one of those top goalie prospects when he was with the Islanders, but the Islanders never really wanted to play him, and then they were so worried about losing him to waivers that he just sort of sat there and didn't play a whole lot of games. And last year with Chicago, with the injuries, when he did get a shot, he didn't overly play well. So he'll probably be in the American leagues this year for the most part.
Well, and with the amount of games Bobrovsky plays, I think he's definitely one of the top 5 goaltenders in the NHL. Korpisalo is one of the names that keeps coming up for potential expansion teams. So if Seattle's granted an expansion team and we go through the same expansion process, he's going to be definitely high on that list. So it's good to see that they have a lot of depth there. Like we said, they're a very young team. They've got a lot of young players pushing for spots on both forward and defense, and with Korpisalo and net, even challenging Bobrovsky. Although Bobrovsky is going to be pretty tough to dethrone for that starting position. Why don't you take us through now some of our prospects that we've got? But actually, just before we do that, we do have the UFA and Mark Letestu. I don't believe I see him coming back to Columbus, but do you see Letestu signing anywhere?
Yeah, I definitely see him getting a job as a third, fourth line player. And when he played with Edmonton, he was actually really good on their power play, being a right-handed shot. That really helps teams because majority of the NHL are left-handed shots for the most part. So a guy that can contribute on the penalty kill and on the power play. He could be a good third, fourth line center for a team as the year draws nearer.
Perfect. Why don't you start us off then with some of the prospects you got on that list, and I'll touch on a few of them as well after you go through the ones that you've got.
Okay, so the two defensive prospects that you teased, their former first round pick Gabriel Carlsson could be pushing for a spot in the NHL with Scott Harrington being there. Between him and Carlson, I think we'll be pushing for that last spot on the back end. And the other defenseman, Dean Kukin, who had a good year in the American League, 15 points in 32 games, and did get into 11 games with Columbus at the end of the year. I think with Kukin, he actually has been a pretty good, good plus minus. I know that stat isn't as big as it used to be, but
it's one of my favorite stats.
yeah, but he seems to be on the right end of the ice when he is out there. Their first rounder, Liam Foudy, who they took in this year's draft. Another young center that they're looking down in the future to get in the lineup, and their biggest name was a third rounder, Vitaly Abramov, who absolutely ripped up the Q this past year. 104 points, 45 goals in only 56 games. And then he had another 9 goals and 16 points in 13 playoff games. This guy, talk about another Russian. If they can develop this guy and keep Panarin, they could be a good 1-2 punch together.
Absolutely. I saw that Abramov split his time between 2 teams in the queue, and obviously was traded for an absolute bunch of players to help with the playoff run. But 104 points is nothing to overlook for sure. So he was at the top of my list. Just a few other names that stood out to me. Vladislav Gavrikov. He was drafted in 2015, pretty late, but the reason being is because he decided to stay in the KHL. He's actually still there, and as of right now, there's no signs of him coming over, but definitely has potential to play or at least make a push for a spot down the road. A few other names. Ryan McInnes, everyone knows that was he came over from Arizona in a trade, son of, I believe, Al McInnes, former Boomer slap shot. He was drafted in the second round in 2014. He's getting a little bit more season now. He'll be really good with the Cleveland Monsters in the AHL, and I think he's going to be one of their first call-ups as they if they start running into injuries just because of his experience. But Andrew Peeke is another defenseman that stood out. He's going back to Notre Dame in the NCAA. He also played and helped the USA at the World Junior Championships this year. He only had a couple points, but young defenseman there. Maybe not this year, but I can see him signing a contract after next season. and making the jump to at least the AHL, if not the NHL. And we'll touch on one more guy, a centerman named Kevin Stenlund that played in the SHL in Sweden last year, just signed a contract. He was their second-round draft pick in 2015. He just signed a pro contract to play with at least the Cleveland Monsters. They brought him over right at the end of last season after his team was eliminated from the Swedish Hockey League, and he got a cup of coffee. So he's a little bit like Dahlin with the Canucks. So he had a full season there, improved, and just got a taste of the AHL right at the end. So he'll probably be in the AHL this year, but watch in a year or two, he might be a name that starts cracking the big clubs lineup. So anything else that you see with those prospects or that you want to touch on with CBJ?
No, not really. The thing is that there isn't a whole lot in Columbus coming up. Like a lot of their young guys that they've drafted are already on their roster, like Anderson, Jenner, Bjorkstrand, Wenberg. So they've been doing a pretty good job of developing guys and getting them into the lineup.
Absolutely. They finished with 97 points last year, getting into the playoffs. Obviously, they have one of the hardest divisions, I think, right now in hockey, because they have to go through both Washington Capitals and or the Pittsburgh Penguins. Well, and that division was dominated by the New York Rangers even for the longest time in regular season. So it's a really tough division. It's a really tough division to get through right now with the current playoff format. So with 97 points, I actually see them with a little bit of a decline this year, but not much. I kind of see them between the 92 to 95 point range, which I think will still be good for playoffs. And I think they, with the youth of their team, they are the youngest team on paper right now for all forward defense and goaltending. I definitely see them continuing to raise their games in the standing. I know their coach, Tortorella, is a little hit or miss, so I'm not sure if they're going to be able to take that next step under his guidance or not. But I do see them slipping a little bit or being around the same because of the depth that they have. Where do you see them before this season starts?
Yeah, I have them in the playoffs again. Probably, I still would put them in that top three spots with Washington and Pittsburgh. So potentially a rematch again with one of those two teams, which is tough because I think some years it's the way like the NHL has it with the points. If they had it in the old system, they wouldn't have to worry about Pittsburgh or Washington like in the first round with having like 100-point seasons and stuff. So it is a bit of a tough luck with how they have it with the Metropolitan division there. But I would see them playing probably Pittsburgh in one of those top three spots again. And it would be nice for Columbus to get their first ever playoff series win. And sort of like Washington, trying to get over that hump of beating the Pittsburgh Penguins or something like that. They might go far in the playoffs.
And of course, if you ever get through that division, you have to play somebody like the Tampa Bay Lightning. But I do, they did finish second overall in the league. Just I believe it was 2 years ago, and they ended up playing Pittsburgh in the first round, who of course went on to win the entire, the Stanley Cup. So it is a very tough division to get through, but I think they keep trending in the right direction. They're definitely close to that playoff spot. So once again, hit that like button, hit the share button. Well, don't hit the share button. Just share it with your friends. Give us some love, guys. Hit the love button. Don't hit the like button. Hit the love button. Let us know that you're watching. Comment on what you like about our show and what you want us to talk about, as we're going to continue through the summer here with our 31 teams in 31 days. Thanks again for watching and listening to B&B Hockey Talk. I'm Aaron Bloxel with Matthew Balzer, and we will see you all tomorrow.